Do you want to start by introducing yourself?
I am Lavender RaIn. I am 25. I've been in the ABTL community, age-regressor community, actively 5 years, considering most of it is on the internet. Most of my time is spent usually with my cat.
We've been an age-regressor within the ABTL community. Do you want to explain what age-regression means for you? And
Age regression for me is a state of mind that I had to take some time to understand for myself because it was something that I think I experienced without any real understanding of the context of what like it actually is and how it applies to me. I know that many other age regressors, APDLs, go about it or experience it differently, and they use that experience for similar reasons on a more personal level, very different reasons. As for me, it's commonly many others would probably say the same thing, but it's therapeutic. It's a way for me to tap into the youthfulness that I missed out on when I was much younger. Growing up in a rough household just allows me to have that freedom, that release of responsibility mentally, where my partner is able to kind of take the wheel, manage me if she so needs to. It's also if she is not there, being able to live in my world and get away from the major stressors of being an adult, because there's a lot of expectations and pressures on adults these days as the world has changed and progressed very quickly. So it's very hard to keep up with the demands. So it's like a mental retreat, either multiple times a day, it could be once a day, once a week. Really just depends on how I'm feeling, how vulnerable I'm willing to feel at that given moment. It is also taking place usually within the safe space of my own home. It does happen in public sometimes, but I understand that people tend to frown upon that. I don't outwardly express that. Usually my partner is very good at noticing it when it happens in public. Generally, she's very playful about it. She will feed into it. The fact that I am an adult and I do have a neurodivergent adult brain, I'm still aware of the environment that I'm in. It's not like a complete mental checkout.
yeah,
It's more or less a adaptation of my behaviors to fit that emotion that I'm feeling at that time, whether it be overwhelm, excitement, very strong emotions can come out, and it can contribute to age regression. To clarify, age regression for me is just a way to tap into that space in my brain where I wasn't feeling safe at that actual age. Now that I'm an adult, I can revisit that when I feel safe to do so.
so what does age-regression look like for yourself? And how does your partner recognize how your age-regression presents?
My speech patterns tend to change very quickly. My attitude, the way I hold myself, I become a little bit more reserved. I clam up, I close off a little bit. Usually, like hands come closer to my body, my feet will come closer. And then, in terms of speech patterns, they'll start to change. There's a general lack of complex language. Everything scales back to very simple statements like, I'm thirsty, or I want that. And I can't express exactly what it is. So then I end up going to pointing. I'm semi fluent in sign language, so I will sign if I must, if I'm not able to actively get that out. This is also commonly known as nonverbal, quote unquote. I'm not able to verbally express what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, what I'm experiencing. So I have to go about like pointing, gestures, sounds, high pitch sounds that like express some kind of happiness or unhappiness, uneasiness, anxiousness, excitement. So it is a reduction of language application in terms of how adult sounding I am versus how youthful sounding I am.
I'd say that's the side that affects your communication, and it can be something that links to your autism as well, being autistic. If you're going through sensory overloads, feeling a bit burnout, then language does get simplified. And like sometimes you become semi-verbal to non-verbal, a bit more stressed. That can come from any trauma-based conditions, mental illnesses that can sometimes be co-diagnosed with being autistic. How do you find that being autistic and an age regressor? How do you separate that from your autistic traits?
There is a definite separation between the two. When I'm recognizing that it's mostly like an age regression thing, it's the cognition, my interaction with everything definitely like scales back. Whereas my autism, it's perpetual. It's always there. It's the way my brain perceives. It's the way just how I handle existing in general. For example, with my autism, I'm very sensitive to like textures, certain sounds, public spaces. I'm generally more anxious, more on the lookout. My awareness tends to heighten a little bit. Whereas with age regression, my awareness will actually dial back. I have almost run into traffic a couple of times on accident. Whereas with autism, I am very hyper vigilant because my brain is at like all-time high. Things are just going on up here that just shouldn't be. Trying to process all the sounds that are going on, all the smells, multiple conversations going on at once, of buses, cars, buildings. Again, this is specific to being in
Yeah.
public. Then as for the age regression, that's when the overload becomes too much, my brain will begin to shut down. And then that's when that starts to kick in. That decline of cognition does begin to reduce. And then that's when my partner has to step in, say, "Are you okay?" And I will generally start having to find alternative ways to communicate what I'm feeling to her. Like, I'm overwhelmed. I am hungry. I am thirsty. I'm tired. I'm cranky. I want to go home. I don't want to be here. That kind of thing. It's when the autism is so overwhelmed that the brain kind of like that I'm not too sure which part of the brain it would be,
Yeah.
but my interaction, my communication definitely starts to decline after a while.
So it's something that definitely links attributes to you being autistic, and your autism definitely affects how you age regress and how it coexists in your brain.
Absolutely. Yes, there is some kind of link between the two. And that's not to say that me as an autistic person, I'm innately more likely to be childish. It's just, I think how it manifests in me specifically, that's how it manifests. Just that overload begins to cause those struggles in communication.
As you said, the communication and lack of awareness of when you almost run out into traffic, losing a sense of danger and becoming a bit more obliviousness. That's a lot how it perceives in public. So how does it perceives in your private life, and some of it's linked to trauma?
In the private area, I would say I spend a lot more time in that headspace because there is that security. I don't have to worry about myself running into traffic. I don't have to worry about dangerous outside force doing something. And it also, I think, is I'm more consciously aware of the fact that I step into that regression when it becomes more of an ABDL regression thing rather than like that
Yeah,
cognitive overwhelm thing manifests more in the home again because there is
yeah,
that barrier of safety. I am not exposed to whatever outside variables. I can go in and out whenever I want, and I tend to spend more time in that headspace as well because my partner and I are relaxing, just talking, having fun. The way I dress also happens to play a lot into that too. Most of the time I do spend in comfortable, more youthful clothing, so to speak. Out in the outdoor world, I'm usually dressed a little bit more appropriately because just to the area that I live in, you don't see that a lot. I also live in a climate where wearing pajamas all the time just isn't the ideal thing to do. Within the home, I am purposely stepping into that because I feel safe to do so 100% of the time.
yeah. And it's home that with you doing it more voluntary as doing as you
Voluntary.
in public. But as it sounds, there's still a matter that it's a communication, and like your sensory cognition that is kind of regressing when you're out in public. It reflects with autistic traits, the sensory process that's different to the voluntary, like the stuff that you've talked in a previous interview about that, it's like, I guess you can enjoy it with your own choices a bit and feel a bit more calm and relaxed, exploring that in your own private life and private space. So when you're in that space in your house, what do you do to like calm and relax yourself then? And what, like the things that you like to do then to in your like little space and age regressed space in your home?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, out there it's like it's a response to overwhelm. Here it's a way for me to explore and to just feel comfortable in that. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great way to look at that and to explain that for sure.
Say when you're at home then, what does that like look like for yourself?
So the things I typically like to do, a lot of cuddling with my partner. Physical touch is a very big thing. I think I was deprived of a lot of that physical touch with my mother during those very important years of my younger life. So a lot of it is like just being close to someone that I feel safe with, that I can open up to, someone who expresses themselves in a more maternal way. My partner she's got very strong maternal instinct, so I think she cues into that very well. TV, we watch just a lot of shows together. In my own time when she's at work, I am watching Peppa Pig, Garfield, cartoons, things that just make me feel cozy, things that I liked to enjoy back then that were often interrupted or taken away or reduced to some way. I can indulge a little bit more. Arts and crafts, I draw a lot. I'll scribble on paper. I'll allow my brain to just wander, not worry about coloring in the lines, anything like that. I can relinquish that a bit more. Legos are another big thing that I interact with quite a bit. I wasn't actually deprived too much of Legos at a younger age, so I think that's just something that I can continue to enjoy. I think as obviously more sets have come out, I've explored those sets and sold them to make the money back to get more. So it's just kind of like continuing the activities that I enjoyed then, and then also re-indulging in the things I wasn't able to. Just the physical touch with my partner, certain TV shows that were consistently interrupted as a younger child, either from just arguments or it was time for me to shut down or whatever, and I just wasn't ready to. Story times are another one. My partner will very willingly and very regularly read any story she can pull off from the internet. I think it was just the other day, Goldilocks and the Three Bears. It was a adapted version of it, which I absolutely loved. It's a little bit longer, a little bit more in depth, but because there was more detail in it, the adult brain of mine was able to cue into it a little bit more. But the little side of me understood that, like, this is Goldilocks and the Three Bears. It's just a little bit longer of a story. Even though I have ADHD, my focus is still very honed into that. Her voice, the timbre of her voice, telling the story. I'm a big storyteller myself, so when I'm hearing stories, it activates that little space in my brain that really enjoyed absorbing information. So story times, TV, Legos, drawing, coloring books. Those kinds of things are definitely big things that I enjoyed then that I can re-indulge in and continue to indulge in as an adult.
When you grew up, you wasn't in a household where you felt happy stress environment and must have had to grow up more than somebody else of your age. So I guess that must be a difficult thing then. And I guess it's trying to explore that, get back to exploring that creativeness, the stimulatingness of what colouring can do, like playing with Lego, enjoying like certain cartoons or like stories, because it's like I say that I think with age regression, like you'd yourself and people within a community, that it seems like a place where you can form they might be hyper empathetic or highly emotionally aware, and having space where you can safely watch cartoons, stuff like that, where it might not be cause too much anxiety or stress, that something that often adult television shows that could be quite triggering. And is that something that you find that you benefit from with your age-regressed space?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. It was stress inducing back then because I knew that at some point, because my brain was already up to here constantly all the time, that I think it was just like a consistent, persistent state of overwhelm and burnout where I wasn't able to really allow myself to get into what I was doing. So there was this lack of connection with the activity that I was putting my focus and attention in at the time because of the environment. Now that I don't have to worry about that, that stress is gone. The tension, the constant worry of something going wrong, something happening, I'm able to let go, to just completely immerse myself and not worry about anything else really going on other than people blowing up my phone. And I can ignore my phone completely.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff definitely, I just drew to a blank.
Mm.
It is definitely, it stands very true. The ability to enjoy and absorb myself in those stimulating activities that were very much affected by outside negative variables back then.
Yeah, I can understand how we can like give you like the space that I think some adults could benefit from, like as you say that, whether it's them in therapy or like creating like safe space to, explore things that aren't stressful and get rid from some of the stresses from everyday life that can cause burnout, depression and anxiety, which can be more so for autistic people with burnout. And it's like I find with autistic people, like, you never return to the right energy and like the same ability to like mask or seem like the more, neurotypical mind of how our neurotypical people see us, the more find it harder to function in a school environment. Then it's something that helped your autistic side of yourself and your side. But as you say that, when your partner's reading you stories, and as you say that, sometimes reading stuff that bit more complex from like a children's story. Guess at the same time of being in that little space, you do need some element of like the way of stimulating the adult mind with some sort level of adultness, if you get me to it. How do you find you bids like separate yourself from like your age regress space to your grown up space, and like what are the things that you find for you could advise people that if they feel like they want to find a way of experimenting to make sure that they can feel quite stimulated in a regressed space? What are the things that ideas you would have for people like that, if you get me?
Sure. I think one of the biggest recommendations is I don't want to assume necessarily, but I want to at least consider that a majority of the people who are stepping into this may have someone with them, like a partner, whoever that might be. I don't want to exclude individuals who are kind of figuring all this out on their own. So, what I can say is allow yourself to be comfortable in your own skin. And that's not like as a transgender person, that creates a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
What I want to convey here is allow yourself to step into that space. Really consider the things that you would have done or the way you would have interacted with those things that you want to try or experiment with. Apply that slowly. You don't want to go head in first. That could be very overwhelming. I think taking it slow and experimenting with various different activities or opening yourself up to that. Just the awareness of openness, being aware to the idea of being open to that really helps, because that tells your brain that this is something that we can consider. And if we can consider it, then we're more likely to do so, especially if we feel safe. Then create boundaries for yourself and whoever's interacting with you. Talking about that partner that you have. If you have a partner, if you're fortunate enough to have one, express to them, things that I want to. The people who are just getting into this, express that I haven't done this. I might feel uncomfortable. I might feel silly. Don't feel that shame, because shame is ultimately what's going to hold you back from doing that. And that shame is ultimately like the root of a lot of negative emotions. Mental shame can paint a very negative perception on a lot of things, because you've attached that emotion to those things. Like, oh, I want to try to regress into that. However, I feel weird. I feel shame. It's okay. That's very normal. You'll feel silly, you'll feel weird, you get a yucky feeling, and that's not all the time. It's very liberating being able to step into that for the first time. For others, it feels silly. For me, it felt silly because it was rammed in my head over years and years of having to grow up so quickly that I wasn't able to make those connections. I can allow myself to do this. I can allow myself to feel positive emotions rather than guilt, shame, disgust, anxiety. Creating boundaries, being open to it, and just being honest with yourself, just trying it out. You kind of have to, you got to dip your toes in somehow, somewhere. Then finding a community is a good way of doing it. It helps with that headspace. Feeling alone, like you're the only one, that can be very daunting, because then that puts even more stress on you. Like if someone finds out about this, like I'm that one-off person that people are going to think is just really weird. It's the benefit of having these social places like Instagram, Twitter. Acts as problematic as it can be, there are good people on there. I've met plenty of people on there who are nothing but sweet, wonderful people who have helped contribute to my age regression, have made suggestions on like, hey, these are the kinds of things that I do. You can try this with your partner. Just communicating that with people that you trust. And I think trust is the number one thing. Trusting yourself and trusting the people around you. Ultimately, having trust in yourself, I think, is a big thing too, because if you can trust yourself in that headspace, you can allow yourself to relinquish that control and not walk out feeling some kind of negativity that will ultimately benefit you in the long run. And finding things that you enjoy. Think back to the things that you did or that you would want to do. So if you want to get that Lego set, get that Lego set. If you want to get that stuffy, get that stuffy. If you want to get that board game, get that board game. Give yourself permission to do that. Because what I've noticed in talking to a lot of people in this community is they just didn't have that permission. They weren't allowed the access to these things that would have fulfilled them at that age. Allowing themselves the fulfillment is number one. If you want to walk in that store and you see something on that toy shelf that you really want, but you feel weird about it, just do it anyways. You're going to feel a lot better at the end. That's what I've taken away. Allow yourself that thing that you wanted.
Like, it's a huge thing to overcome that I understand many people would feel, because with you're in an environment where you might not be able to, where you have to mask like yourself, you have to sometimes in situations you feel like for your own safety you might have to mask your autism, and like it's like sometimes you wouldn't be able to be as in public, you wouldn't be as regressed, or in your little space, like in the clothes you feel closer you like to wear, in within confidence. So it does take a lot to get to that point. But I say that if you can just like listen to like be able to hear voices like yourself talking about your experience and your confidence, and that can help a person out, because just hearing that you're not alone in this and there's other people who, you know, when, like use these things that may not be typical of the age, and it's good to challenge that stigma and barriers to things. So when you had started out being like experimenting with your age regressions, what are the things that you started out with and the things that helped you really explore and get into that space and made you feel happy in that space?
At first, I had to accept that part of me was lacking. There was a part of an integral part of my personality that needing that relinquishment. I needed to learn how to let go because I'm a very highly anxious person. I'm constantly holding on to internalizing things. Let that breath go. You're holding it in for too long, you're going to pass out eventually. Letting go of that, uh, the shame, the guilt, I had to internalize some kind of relief. And it wasn't easy telling myself that because things I was told I internalized over years and years and years. So having a partner that was comfortable and open to me letting go ultimately helps. Now, that's not a prerequisite to letting go. You don't have to have some external force, some external source telling you you can also do this. That validation sure is helpful, but the ultimate source of validation is within yourself. No one can tell you what to do. No one can force you to do anything other than yourself. So I had to accept that I'm the arbiter of my life. I have agency. And as an autistic person, I think a lot of autistic people can relate to this. We're very aware to our self-advocacy. I think self-advocacy in autistic individuals is very high. There's a lot of studies there's a lot of metrics that have shown that, like self-advocacy, like, hey, I'm a person, I deserve X, Y, and Z. I know what I need. And people that disagree or say, no, I think, X, Y, and Z is better suited, that external invalidation can really negatively impact that internal validation that you're trying to have for yourself. So something that I actually have talked to a couple people about is don't worry about the naysayers. Don't worry about what other people have to say about that, especially if it's just negativity, because negativity really drives it locks people in negativity. And this is what I was just talking about a second ago, is like that shame and that guilt. So for me, I had to understand that there is guilt and shame attached to that. And if I held on to that any longer, it was going to continuously impact negatively. Here we go, saying negatively again.
Yeah.
My development as a person. So it's understanding that there's that missing piece. How do I go about finding that missing piece? And in this case, it's age regression. It's enjoying more, and I think you put it in a really great way, not age appropriate thing, because as an autistic person in a very shaky household, forced to grow up very fast. So I had to move away from those things very quickly because at the time it was, all right, it's this kind of time to put those things down, honey. And it's like, I don't really want to, but okay. Walking into the online age play or age regression space, I was immediately opened up to so many things, the first steps that I could take. So like, I think a lot of it had to do with like attachment items. Example I have nearby me is a stuffy. Stuffies are a great way to get into that because age regression and stuffies are very hand in hand. So having like something that you can cuddle with, something that you can become attached to. My first attachment, it's a Minnie Mouse stuffy, which my partner bought for me at a thrift shop. That was only a year ago. Even the course of the year is when a lot of this started to make more sense to me. I had to allow myself to buy stuffies. And after buying the stuffy, that opened up a space in my brain that was lacking, that missing piece. Having something I can cuddle with that has some auditory feedback. This one rattles, sensory feedback that makes you feel comfortable, I think is important. For me, to sum it up, for me, it was just stepping into my first stuffy, something that I could hold on to, feel. I can give it a name. I can give it a personality. It's an extension of me, smaller side of me, that imaginative, creative, adventurous part of me. I can go on adventures with this guy in my own mind. I can go on adventures with this guy in the outside world. And if I'm not feeling comfortable in a certain space, I have something close to me that reminds me that everything is okay. It's okay to feel vulnerable if I need to be.
Like, that totally doesn't make sense because, as you say, that it's something that I feel like you identify as an age-regressor or little, it's something that I think anyway, any autistic people might have their own versions of, like a stuffy or whatever they like have different comfort items that help them out and, they might feel attached to and like to carry and have as comfort thing for them because like it's like a sensory thing, it's stimming thing, and something that can help the anxiety and make you feel quite relaxed. Because something that, when you go out as an autistic person, some of us can, like lack that confidence and sense of independence. And I think because like if you're out on your own, it can be feel quite lonely and isolated. But I guess from when you like taking your stuffy with you or your cuddly toy, whatever, it's something that I guess can make you feel a bit more relaxed, more at peace. That because it feels like you got some sort of like companionship, something with you that guess in a way that doesn't make you feel totally on your own, is it?
Absolutely. I spent about 6 months away from my partner just recently, and I have had him, this little guy right here, for since just before Christmas. And before I got this, the Minnie Mouse stuffy, I took her everywhere. I took her to the store, the library, to work a couple times because there are times where work is just so stressful that I needed my Minnie near me. I would just keep her by my backpack. And fortunately, I think as time has gone on, a lot of the naysayers have drifted away. The generation of people that I hang out with tend to understand that. I'm jealous. You have the confidence to take a Minnie Mouse stuffy with you out in public and you're 25. I envy you. I would feel awkward doing that, but you embody that confidence. You go for it. So that helps me too. It's also a societal thing. Having something or someone, I have to be honest with myself. He's a someone. He's not just
Yeah,
a thing. He's a someone. Gives me that sense of connection with that part of myself, that younger, more adolescent attitude really does help, especially in times where I'm not able to be with a maternal figure that is with me at that time, my partner. So that fills a gap that was there for a long time because of that separation at a young age, that moving on from those childlike things that I didn't want to have to let go of because I was forced to grow up, eventually grow up. That created that void. I was watching a YouTube video this morning. This content creator, she does her entire channel is focused around autism stuff. One of my special interests
yeah.
is autism and psychology, and she was talking about this individual who posted to it. It was like, am I the a-hole thread? During the holidays there was a family get together and there was a big blow up, I will say, between a couple of the family members and the autistic child of this family. And they were upset that this autistic child still preferred more childlike things like squishmallows, toys, interactive toys, things like that. They were 19 or something at the time, and how that was just too childish and not age appropriate. And I had a problem with that because here I am clutching my not age
Yeah.
appropriate stuffy at 25 years old. Like you said, the stigma around age appropriate things is problematic. And allowing yourself to have those things that are not age appropriate really does help, especially if it's something that you can take around with you.
It's like something that people like another person that kind of goes out by myself and feels that independence. But it's like last year, like I had the dog my grandparents have had for years, and we're looking after it now. And it's like until then, it wouldn't really go on a walk even around my village. But now, like since I had him, I like started to go out and walk around the village, and get a bit more active by doing something by myself. And it's that thing, as you said, where it's like, could even be like a pet, but it could easily be like some sort of comforter. Like you said, you're like Minnie Mouse stuffy, or like the octopus one that you have with you. That's something that when you're going out, it can give you that sense of comfort. But as I say, if you are one person doing it, it's something that once you build up the confidence for it, it can allow you to be a bit more able to unmask in public and less, say, and anxious about the thought of even doing it, and can feel a bit okay with yourself and start to ignore any judgment. And even by that, if you know, like somebody less easier doing that. As you said, yeah, the people feeling a bit jealous of that, but then it could give like courage for another person to think of, if I would feel comfortable, more relaxed, less stressed and anxious with something like that. Maybe it's something I ought to try, or maybe it's something that I should be more open to and shouldn't judge other people for doing so. As like it seems that, as I say, that there's the old societal issues takes, you know, like years, decades to overcome, but it's just like, oh, the small things can definitely help.
A great point too. Pets. Pets can be a comfort item too. I grew up with cats and a couple dogs. I've been more of a cat person. I actually have two cats. One of them is right here in between my legs. She is my princess, and she brings me the ultimate kind of grounding. She reminds me that it's okay to just sit and be cute and cozy, and that everything is okay. I think having an emotional support animal as an autistic person really does help. So it doesn't even have to be a stuffy blankie, a toy. It can even be a pet. Pets are a huge benefit too, often overlooked as like a comfort item.
As you said, it's something that, like, you felt that it's something like missing from your personality when you talked about age regression earlier, and it's like something that. So when was it that you worked that it was like age regression, and age regression that was missing from your personality? And do you think that it's like you always been regressed, and it's something that, or was it something that you realized that you started doing later on?
I think it took a while for me to really look into it. This would actually be a great moment for me to explain my transitioning. Pre-transition, I was your typical stoic male, big beard, strong, couldn't show emotion, anything like that harms men. In that lack of desire, willingness to tap into those emotions, and then that goes down that rabbit hole of men aren't tapping into their emotions. When I allowed myself to look into this and when I started transitioning, coming out of that strong stoicism, exploring age regression helped me understand playfulness, understand aloofness, allowing myself to not be so serious and to allow my imagination to flourish, because femininity and childishness are very closely associated, not linked, I would say associated. If you look at like Disney princesses, often very childish, aloof, imaginative, very optimistic, whereas the stoic male can be very grounded, logical, calculated. So, embracing some kind of playfulness helped when I started going down this path, as I started to transition, exploring femininity, that playfulness, one of the other missing pieces, because I took myself seriously for so long that I lost that connection with the playful, creative, imaginative nature that I think just as humans should be allowed to indulge a bit more. We're forced to conform to these very strict, structured routines that dilutes that playfulness that a lot of people yearn for, whether they realize that or not. So, age regression has been one of those things that has allowed me that place to explore like youthfulness, playfulness, the things that I think my masculinity was locking in a box. Once that opened, it was like Pandora's box. As I've gotten older, I've only been transitioning for a couple of years, and I think I restarted, I've done this twice, officially like got back into my transition at 23. And at the time, I was very closed off, anxious, angry, and pent up. When I finally let go of that negativity and that shame, and I allowed myself to step into that, I allowed myself to invest in cute, soft things. I opened myself up to those spaces in my mind that were locked away. And I eventually started having conversations with, like, internal conversations with that younger side of myself that really needed that validation. Like, hey, I'm still here. I need you to recognize that I was ignored for a very long time. And that put a lot more into my personality. And it even helped me at work. It gave me more confidence. It even helped me understand my autism more, my sensory needs, my communication needs. I became more open with myself when I stepped into this. So when I became more open with myself, that stoked confidence, that stoked, I think, so, like a positive type of self-awareness too, like not like an anxious self-awareness, like, oh, am I doing something wrong? Wearing the mask all the time, constantly masking. I've actually found myself masking a lot less in public. I think as I've gotten older and as I've become more interconnected with this part of myself, I almost become more autistic as I have gotten older, because I know my needs, because I know the way that I interact with people, because I've spent more time in that headspace.
Yeah, I
So
kind of, I kind of get the whole thing of, like feeling a lot more autistic when you get older because, like, as like a child, you might not been explained what autism really meant, and something that I can understand how, like, for probably like people like ourselves, because we had a lack of information, that's kind of how it becomes like a special focused interest of wanting to understand ourselves more, learn a lot more about being autistic. But as you said, we transitions help you understand a lot more about your autism, and self, and that allowed you be a bit more expressive with your emotions and kind of deal with any like trauma and like stuff you've been through and any like feelings and all that. So what was it that made you realize or recognize within yourself that you knew you were trans, if you get me? Like, how did you know that you went to the pre-trans, you went to the transition? Because as you said, we were at one point quite like stoic, masculine, somebody who wouldn't like discuss or reflect on your own emotions then. So what would you think was the turning point that you recognized that part in yourself that was as you lacking from your personality and lacking from your own expression?
I think it was a partner that I had at the time. They were very feminine, and there was a feminine gap in me that I was missing my entire life. I low key knew that I wasn't a boy. So I needed something to attach that to, and I needed the freedom to explore that. When I was younger, my siblings and I would engage in role play and parallel play along with like TV shows that we were watching at the time. So, like, something that I was very big into was Scooby Doo and Teen Titans, like the original Teen Titans. And my favorite characters between those two were Daphne and Raven. So I was always role playing those two characters, very female characters. And that kind of dipped in and out. And as I got older, I started to feel a little bit more insecure about those feelings, and it kind of got internalized. And then as I got older and I started engaging in more adult relationships, I ended up in a very close, intimate relationship with a very feminine individual who was socially liberal, which at the time I was more socially conservative. And so, and as a very open minded person, I really started to engage in conversation with this person about like the things that they feel and believe. I have to take a step back when I just mentioned I needed something to associate, I needed a word, an idea to put that feeling that I had to. And sometime in my freshman, sophomore year of high school, that summer before sophomore year of high school, and this was like 2013, 2014, I discovered the term transgender on my school computers. I had someone who I was going to school with who carried that label. And I was like, "Oh, what is this?" My father described to me what a transvestite was. So I kind of started looking that up, and then I went to the rabbit hole of transgender. And that's when I think I finally had something that answered that question, like, this is how I'm feeling. Okay. And so then I dabbled in that throughout high school, didn't get very good responses from my family. And so that further created some kind of internalization, like maybe this isn't right, maybe I am wrong. And then it was just a lot of derogatory conversations from my family. And then that kind of further pushed that in. And then it wasn't until that partner that I had where I explained to them, like, I've felt certain ways about myself in the past. I've wanted to transition. I'm 99% sure I'm transgender. I almost self-identified as gender fluid for the longest time because I found myself going in and out of it. And what I came to learn through this partner was I'm not gender fluid. I'm very much transgender because there are a lot of feminine aspects about me that have come out when I was a part of this relationship. For example, this partner was big on wigs, very big on anime characters and stuff like that. So she was making an online content for TikTok, and she interacted with that audience. And that femininity really resonated with me, that kind of femininity, that bright, bubbly, almost not really bimbo-esque, but very hyper feminine to an extent. And when I allowed myself to step into that, when she expressed the willingness to engage in a relationship with me, was it when I started to really devote more time to actually pursuing that. So I think for the longest time, I really avoided transitioning because it prevented me from pursuing a relationship with someone, because I'm very relationship driven. I've always I, I've I'd I had been seeking a long-term relationship from a very young age. I was a very devoted to someone in high school, wanted a high school sweetheart, came out to the trans as them. They didn't take it very well. Then it was on and off for about 4 years, and I'd have to closet that part of me just to keep this relationship going, and that wasn't fulfilling to me. So when this relationship came along where they were open to that, that really helped. And that is when I got on hormones for the first time. And then when that happened, the hormones started changing the way that my emotions manifested. I got far more emotional, upset very quickly. I got very just agitated very fast. So that had its negative consequences on the relationship, which didn't last very long, or the relationship consequently did not last very long. And then I ended up moving out of state, and then I closeted it all over again. And then I was very devoted, like, okay, at this point, I know I'm a man. I can't do this. I've already tried it. I've been on hormones. It didn't work. It didn't make me feel the right way. And then I met my partner, who I'm with now, who we've been married for almost 2 years at this point, and I have never felt any more interconnected with myself ever before. So I think it was that validation from a partner that really allowed myself to open up to this part of myself. So if it weren't for her, I guess being bi as well really helped. And I even opened up to her about just my incontinence problems, which is where the diaper wearing comes from, with the age play and stuff like that, which has been a problem across my entire life, a lot of trauma attached to that as well. She was very comfortable with that. She's like, okay, all right, cool. And then I expressed to her, I was trans in the past, and this person, we were together and I was transitioning, and then like the hormones kind of had their negative consequences, all the stuff that I kind of just elaborated upon. She took that and she thought about it, and she's like, no, I understand. And if that's something you'd want to do, I'd fully support it, and I'd love you the same. And I was like, okay, cool. And then I think it was the same month, same week, 2 years later, I got back on hormones, and I haven't looked back since.
I was just saying then, when you were saying about feeling there was something missing in the personality, then it's, and for the story as you explained about your transition, as you say, that there was a lot of masking and, like, at the time, I'd say that when you were at your own, most, when you were male presenting, pre-transition, at what would be like seen as the most masculine, then, it was something, I guess, was more of, trying to, you know, play something that you wasn't, and I guess trying to be a person that you weren't, and you, I guess, wasn't an environment where you could feel too confident and wasn't validated by your friends, like your partners and like the community environment grew up in. And as I said that years ago, you were more socially conservative, but as you said, I guess it wasn't so much being socially conservative, but it was more that grew up in an environment of social conservatism, and it's just that kind of projection and the impact of being exposed to that environment now that kind of creates that mindset. And I guess then having moved out of your state, having a partner who's bisexual, a lot more socially liberal and progressive like that, has allowed you to explore that. Because as I say that, being autistic, it's, I said that sometimes it can be able to be a bit more individually minded, able to be a bit more liberally minded, a bit more, self-expressive and advocate for yourself. But it's only something you can do with the right information, knowledge, and the right support, and something that I suppose ever trans, autistic people, ever, gender fluid, non-binary people do struggle with that yourself, as you said, that like going through when you first tried transitioning before, I guess at the time you probably was quite alone in it, because you guess you didn't have anybody who could explain and explore with you what transitioning actually looks like in terms of, because it's one thing that I understand actually medically, physically transitioning. It's something that definitely isn't plain sailing, and, doesn't, you know, instantly make you feel great within yourself. As you said, the hormonal changes and being autistic, dealing with that change in emotions can be quite overwhelming, but being in a position where you can have that support that this is, normal to feel this way when you transition, and feel now accepted and validated in how you feel now.
Yeah, definitely. Environment that's something that I recognized, I think very early on, was environment is key when it comes to how an autistic person specifically can develop. Like if you, in my instance, closeted trans my entire life, my household, and funny enough, wasn't even really that conservative either. Like my father, of course, had his conservative values because he was raised by the former World War II vet, shell shocked, like to the nines. So like there was that. And my mother, psychologist, everything like that, works with kids, very socially liberal. And so like there's this weird dichotomous environment that I was raised in, where I was like, they didn't understand a lot of things that I was dealing with internally because they had no exposure or knowledge in that specifically. I don't want to expose too much about my family or anything like that,
Yeah,
but I do have,
I understand
uh,
that.
no, my grandfathers are actually gay. I've had that kind of exposure. And so what my father was definitely of the opinion that is my child just gay? And I had to explain to him, no, I still like chicks. So he's like, but you can't be trans and straight at the same time. And I'm like, are you sure? So there was that lack of education that really negatively impacted the relationship with my family and I. And then again, there's the weird mixed, and I'm not going to drag politics in this, but like conservative liberal household, like very family tied, but also very progressively minded without the exposure of the outside world. It's very sheltered. Things were the way they were. My family like understood things the way that they were 20 years ago, but that didn't really apply to the times at that time because the internet was suddenly more proliferated than it has ever been, and it's only got more at that since then. But environment, stepping back to just environment, is really key to the development. I think not even just autistic people, is just anybody, allistic people as well. You stick a very artistic person in a very academic, structured household, you're going to get tug and pull. You put someone who may perceive the world spiritually a little bit differently into a very structured Christian household or vice versa, that can create tension. That can create some kind of dissonance later in life, even within that person. They internalize all the things that they were raised in with that environment. They start to question things about themselves. Am I right? Am I wrong? Should I be feeling this way? Is it okay to be feeling this way? Am I just weird? Am I that one-off odd case? And a lot of the time that is not the case. It's environment. So now that when I was able to, not when I was able to have that kind of support and have, or when I was exposed to that kind of support, and when I was in an environment that allowed for that kind of discourse, did it allow me to open myself up to those potentials that maybe I can do these things with myself. I can explore these ideas, and maybe this could actually benefit me. Maybe because I'm no longer held back by the beliefs that my family had imposed on me for so long. And they
Yeah,
also were very big proponents of, if you want to do these things, you're going to have to do it as an adult. But as long as you are under our household, under our roof, you basically have to say and do as we tell you, which is toxic all on its own. Again, environment really does shape how someone can develop as a person. And I think separation from very overbearing parents, especially, or caregivers, whoever, doesn't even have to be parents, grandparents, aunt, uncle, whatever, um, most of the time does dividends. A lot of time it's can go one of two ways. You either see people do really well, or you see people crash and burn because they had that lack of knowledge. And for me, I crashed and burned before things got better. And it was that learning experience through finally distilling myself into an environment that was conducive to the development of my personality.
yeah. I think it's that thing that, as I said, you don't want to go too like deeper personal into the family side of things, but from what you were hinting at, then it's like some of them what made it, I guess, more happy is with the family is sometimes you don't always know how to talk to a family member about these things, or feel entirely know how to feel 100% safe and confident in talking about these things, in fear of like how it would affect your relationship with them, and what and how it could impact them and cause more conflict. So if you're entirely not 100% trustworthy that it could go well for you, it's then harder to be yourself in front of them. As you said, even though they weren't entirely like fully like socially conservative, different ideology, but I guess it's just that kind of wider society general, and kind of quite common, the kind of anxiety about something more very liberal, and like something that isn't necessarily something ordinary, or like in a community. As you say that when you're growing up, and even people like 10 years ago, and sometimes people of older generations, whilst they might have gay relatives and like gay grandparents and stuff like that, it's something that bisexuality and pansexuality may be something a bit confusing and misunderstood and at as say with like being trans and transitioning, where that's being played about in the media, and that's causing a lot of anxiety. Like even with some people who are maybe not technically conservative, but not strictly liberal, but something that there's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty about allowing, like as said, when you was child or a lot younger, like and your parents about exploring and trying to mask that certain areas of yourself, and so for because autistic people are highly common to be divergent in gender and sexuality, then I can understand how highly common your experience must be for some autistic people.
Definitely. See, we still know not a lot, but we know a lot more than we did 20, 30 years ago. My mother is a psychologist and received her master's degree in psychology, research her specialization in child psychology. She works day in and day out diagnosing kids with ADHD. So, like, to an extent, she understands neurodivergency, and that's something I've had to recognize, even though that they struggled raising me because of the way my brain worked, and they didn't understand because there's a separation that exists in families who have neurodivergent children. I'm an autistic person. That's just who I am. It's a part of my personality. I don't have autism. I don't carry it around like a little handbag. I'm an autistic person. So, like, living with that day in and day out affects everything. With my mother being a psychologist, she's obviously very bright and well educated. However, going past the basic differences between neurotypical and neurodivergent brains, our understanding or our perception of gender, sexual orientation, anything like that is very diverse. Our understanding of what gender is, I think, is a bit more skewed, because when we think about gender, at least me personally, I can't speak on behalf of all autistic people because it is very much a spectrum.
Yeah.
When I perceive gender, what is gender in the first place? You can look historically during, what was it, like the 40s, 50s? One of the presidents, can't remember exactly who it was, basically is the one who, like, boys wear blue, girls wear pink. And that's just kind of how it's been since. And it's been that very homogenous, enforced thing for so long that come this more progressive generation of people that are a bit more open-minded. And then we're given the internet discourse, I think, allowed more neurodivergent people to explore these ideas like, okay, like, gender can't be this weird binary thing. Like, I feel a certain way, but that doesn't line up with the binary. So am I broken? Is there something wrong with me? Gender dysphoria was the DSM-4. It was a neurological thing. It was a diagnosable problem. I know over on the other side of the pond, you have to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria to receive some kind of gender care. At the time of me receiving my care, that was the case. I don't know if that's the case anymore. But because of this binary thing that has been established for so long, neurodivergent people have had to struggle with neurotypical people who subscribe to the binary. It creates, again, dissonance between us and them. It creates an us and them dynamic. And if you look at societally, even like right now, like how divided the entire world is, not just the US, they've got the same issues going on across the pond.
Yeah, I'm fully
The
familiar with
bite
that.
that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So, like, the binary really did us in for a lot of issues. And I think neurodivergent people can understand that a little bit better because we are able to process things a little bit differently that maybe neurotypical people can't. And this is just a metaphorical example. We look at a painting and we can draw conclusions that the person that painted the painting in the first place is like, what do you mean? I don't understand what you're getting at. So just because the way our brains are wired innately, I think arms us with the ability to challenge things that have been established and maybe have done us more harm than good. As I've stepped out of that binary, I feel more better as a person. I feel like I understand myself and I understand the world a little bit better because I've been able to explore these things differently than the neurotypical people can that have been running the world for so long. That also being said, we also have to recognize that we are neurodivergent people. When I say we
Yeah.
as neurodivergent people, I'm talking to the neurodivergent community. We live in a neurotypical world. We live in a world that is very structured and set up in a way that best suits people that fall into the typical brain chemistry, however you want to go about explaining that. So it's troublesome because when you have transgender people, binary people, pansexual people,
Yeah.
whoever, trying to make these points to people that established a binary so long ago on very conservative values, it creates tension. You know, kids having traumatic experiences with their families. In my experience, they just don't understand. They don't get it out of touch. Yeah, that's what you kind of hear a lot. It's like, you're just a little out of touch, old man. And I think the more that autistic people, neurodivergent people come together and recognize that, like, our experience, our perception of the world is significantly different than the people who are running it, we obviously have to do something about it. We have to create some kind of, we
Yeah.
have to stand our ground. And as a person who lives that, it's tricky because we can understand it a little bit better than they can.
Yeah.
It's just that disconnect there, that how do we bridge that gap?
Yeah, because it's
How much
yeah, it's
go
totally
ahead, sorry.
definitely tricky because the key thing of making that change to bridging the gap is actually having people to listen to us. But as you say that, for like the trans non-binary community, it's that people talk over us and not listen and hear the words we say and listen to understand our experiences. And as you talk about the neurodivergent community, the majority of the neurodivergent community definitely have an instinct to tell people like I might not be who you think I am, and I have a right to express that and be myself, find and explore that, and not to be put into any sort of box or stereotype of like viewing my gender as like just like boys as you might be thought of boys years ago, but I could be like non-binary, like as I identify as non-binary myself, but I'm not exactly like I'm sometimes masking that to other people around me, so it might not always be as open if that's correcting people on like misuses of pronouns or whatever, but it's something that I see that could be very of liberating and like finding ways of like expressive my like could express my appearance or whatever, and like as you say that like it has helped you more sense of empathy, sense of how you look at yourself. But when you look at yourself as with gender now, it does help that we can be a bit more yourself as to otherwise. It's like you feel a lot unmasked then if you're not expressing yourself, if you get what I mean.
Absolutely. Being able to express that openly has helped with that unmasking. I think a lot of people understand what the masking thing is.
And
Definitely, we've used that term a couple of times. You're good. Being honest with yourself, and also just being honest with people, and having the willingness to have rapport with people who may not understand that, I think is going to be the most beneficial thing, because you'll end up with these very one-way conversations. I'm trying to say one thing, you're trying to say another.
yeah,
There's no connect there. So I think as time goes on, I really hope that the neurodivergent community, trans community, LGBTQ community, however you want to slice it, however you want to label it, I think we need to be more receptive of what the other side has to say. But the other side also has to be receptive of us as well, because the world is changing very quickly. And with the advent of the internet, it's only going to keep going up and up and up. And as things get harder and harder, I think we just need to be more open to the idea that we both have different experiences, we perceive and feel differently. And once there's some kind of, I think there needs to be like a communion among the community, because there's
yeah,
a division within our communities
yeah,
themselves. We're even getting in fights with each other, and even in the ABDL age-regression community, there's infighting all the time, and I
yes,
see it, and I'm just like, I wish we could just get over this we're all on the same team. We're all fighting the same battle. It's
Yeah.
just we all are, I think we've all become individually radicalized in some kind of way. And so once we can kind of get over our own egos in that way, because I think we've all got an
Yeah.
ego. We all do. They're all inflated. And now that we have the internet, we
Yeah.
all have the opportunity to be that one person everyone hears. So once we stop, you know, forcing everyone to listen to us, and once the division of opinions can kind of be
Yeah.
diluted down, and like we understand there just has to be some kind of overall acceptance of what can be. And if we can apply that, whatever that end is, will there be some kind of union across communities?
As you were saying, then it's something that, well, autistic neurodivergent people, we have to self-advocate and do self-see a lot, for ourselves as individuals and communicating our needs. But as I say, the importance of doing it as community, whether it's as trans, non-binary, neurodivergent community, as like age-regressor, ABDL community, like you gotta be able to group together and actually advocate, because sometimes, as you say that, sometimes you may be like non-speaking or semi-speaking, like when you regressed and feeling that small space. But also then with like autistic burnout, you might not be able to have the energy and ability to actually, when people are able to, you are able to make people listen, and sometimes not make, have the energy and the capacity to make people listen. And that's definitely like a big thing of the importance of having a community there, to advocate and actually to get people on the same page. But when you was talking about being autistic, well, at what point did you find out you were autistic and had ADHD and get your diagnosis?
I was diagnosed with ADHD at 5, so pretty young. My mother was just starting her psychology program at the time. She started to notice as she was being educated that I had a displacement for these, I was possibly ADHD, and tested positive for ADHD. And when it was made known to me that I was autistic, this was the age of the DSM-4. At the time, I was diagnosed with PDD-NOS, which is pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified or not specified. It's not a specific pervasive developmental disorder. So what that meant was like I fit criteria for a couple of different things, like lack of social skills, inability to recognize cues, things like that, emotional dysregulation, problems with learning, I guess like some kind of learning disability. I haven't really researched PDD and OS specifically because it's not in the DSM anymore. It's not really relevant, because with the advent of the DSM-5, it became autism spectrum disorder. Autistic people have spiky profiles. So like
Yeah.
we can be great in certain areas like special interests, filing away facts and retaining information about things that we are very interested in. It's something we're very good at. However, there could be other areas that we could be lacking in, like the ability to communicate certain emotions, being able to perceive certain emotions, even like understanding like what I am feeling is something a lot of
Yeah.
autistic people struggle in. Others can pinpoint that maybe a little bit better than others. And then there could be like being
Yeah.
able to coordinate, understanding where we are in physical space. Dyslexia, something that I struggle with, jumbling words together, talking too fast, which is also could be like comorbidity with
Yeah.
ADHD, having comorbid symptoms of other mental
Yeah.
complications.
As
Yeah.
as I say, that's where the kind of big bubble of, what comes under the, neurodivergent and well, all these different conditions and like as it related to sparks yourself. So yeah, as I say that, you got ADHD and autism and yeah, so and what age was your autism diagnosis exactly?
So I was in middle school at the time. My family had noticed that I was really starting to struggle in school, and like my social problem, like my interaction with them, understanding them, like the social cue thing was something that they really picked up on. And so they had me tested. I think it was also right after a bunch of legal stints that I had. I ended up in a week in juvenile lockup for a lot of stuff that I was doing at the time. just very dysregulated, and they needed answers. I don't carry it
Yeah.
around like this thing it is. It is who I am as a person. It is an innate part of my personality, how I perceive the world, how I interact with individuals and the world itself. So, yeah, at about 12, 13 years old is when I officially had it on paper that I was autistic.
So, and as I said, then it kind of understand then when you like link into like, oh, how like your experience of like with a just like a latest diagnosis then kind of explains how some like how like sometimes like it presents a bit with mental health, like struggles and challenges, and then like as I said that I guess before you were diagnosed, then like when you said you were work in juvenile prison, you must, I assume that must be some of the misunderstandings or of like maybe autistic, neurodivergent behavior, even though I guess don't want, maybe not want to go into circumstances of all that, but I say that, it's something I guess about, but it's like something that you might have only started recognizing, so like in your adult years, what it really means to be autistic, since you didn't have the understanding of what you almost like what your gender was when you were younger.
I think like looking back, it's harder because I know so much more than I did now. And
Yeah,
I am thinking about how my mother was a psychologist. I wish she would have known a lot of this, but I also understand that like it's not her
yeah,
specialty. And it's different raising a kid with autism than it is working with someone that you have diagnosed that this person is autistic, that you've deduced that through some kind of scientific metric based way. You can visually see like these are statistically numbers, whatever, however you want to go about explaining that. This is how this person marks, this is how the brain works. Whereas, I gave birth to this person, this is how they behave. I don't understand a lot of this at all, even though like, yes, my background may be in X, Y, and Z, but it's very hard to apply that to your child. So at the time, one thing that I will be transparent about is I was raised in a very alcoholic household. There was a lot of alcohol abuse involved, especially like my father. Then my mother kind of adopted that alcohol abuse as well, because I think it was a way for her to cope with the fact that her husband wasn't treating her very well because of it. So she kept up with him to numb that, or to keep up with him. Say for sure that's how it was, but what that ended up causing was a lot of emotional tensions between them, and then emotional tensions between me and my father. Now, my father and I share no blood. He's a stepfather, I guess, is the
yeah,
best way to explain it. However, because he stepped into my life at such a young age, I had to have been about 6 months old when I met him. That when they were married, I was about a year and a half. My second youngest sibling was just barely born at this time. So he is my father by all extents, really,
yeah,
other than the fact that we don't share blood.
yeah,
So that made it really hard because like I understood that we didn't share that paternal relationship. So I was very leaning towards my mother. However, because of the things that my mother was struggling with and my own my own special needs that I needed,
yeah,
made it hard for them to manage me because they were busy drinking a lot of the time and constantly getting in arguments. They were at each other's throats enough where that stress was then put onto me. That stressed me out. I was constantly exposed to domestic violence, arguments that led from 9 o'clock in the evening till 3 o'clock in the morning, constant threats of I'm leaving, that on top of when I started to try to do something about it, i.e., removing myself from that situation in the form of running away, engaging in delinquency, stuff like that became a problem. So then that fed into the resentment that was already built between my parent and the rift between my father and I. So it was just I think it was just a perfect recipe for disaster having an autistic ADHD child that's very disorganized. I had a hard time understanding sarcasm. I took everything very literally, which then induced a lot of anxiety problems, an anxiety disorder, possibly a depression problem, because neurodivergent people, autistic people, are statistically significantly higher to have to anxiety and depression. On top of my father having anxiety problems, he had been on, my mother having her own emotional dysregulation problems due to the fact that she was in an abusive relationship, but still trying to do her best to raise eventually 4 kids, one of which was a delinquent, in and out of lockup, always running away. Trying to manage an out of control child became very hard. So it was very confusing for all of us. And I think that did a lot more harm than good because of their lack of understanding of me as a child. And because I was not willing to open up to them about the things that I felt, because I felt constantly under pressure, constantly having my safety feel like it was threatened. I can even go back to a memory that I had when I was 3 years old. I can remember banging on the door a lot, asking for my mother, crying out for my mother, and then eventually my father, during a drunken rage, just rips my door off of my hinges, and I never saw that door again. So that sense of safety that I was supposed to have at a
Yeah.
very young age was completely stripped away from me. So never feeling safe, that negatively impacted my relationship with my family, which then negatively impacted my interactions with my family, which then in
Yeah.
turn, it's just a domino effect. So being a neurodivergent child in an already shaky household really did not work out very well in terms of, again, going back to communication with people that don't understand. I couldn't do anything to make them understand because I was too scared to explain that to them because I didn't feel like they would believe.
It's that kind of thing, sad fact that a lot of neurodivergence to people I come across online with, like who are ADHD or ADHD autistic and all that, it can, come from houses where their parents and family members have like addiction issues or like abusive or narcissistic stuff like that is highly common in the community, and I think that does explain where your regression comes from, in the sense that like back then you went to grow up and you were aware of so much that now at the age you are, sometimes you want to be a bit oblivious and not, be aware of so much of the like more traumatic and overwhelming things going on in the world around you. Like it kind of explains why that if like had quite emotional upbringing in the past, that where you would seek pleasure and comfort out of something that was safe and wouldn't cause you any like feelings of sadness and upset when you watch cartoons over any like certain dramas, because like that maybe heightened sense of empathy and sensitivity, and that play a distinct memory from when you were like early on as a kid, that can impact need of retreating into the comforts that typically associated with children enjoying and seeking pleasure out of. We've also want to ask you with the age regression, is this something that since you grew up being identified as a boy and being told that you're a boy, things that boys typically do, even though you had maybe bad feeling in the back of your head, yeah, you didn't feel entirely comfortable, or you didn't feel like you weren't a boy. So do you think that regress now gives you the space to be feminine side and enjoy the things that you wouldn't been able to do that if you were able to be raised in a gender that you feel they recognize that you are as a trans woman? That do you think that has helped you reclaim your gender in regression as well?
Absolutely. It's funny you bring it up in that way because I can remember growing up, it was my mother's little pony set that I was obsessed over specifically, and I didn't treat them very well because I was a boy. So there was that little exposure to like feminine toy really contributed to that awareness later on that like these are the things that I really wanted. When it comes to age regression, yes, it does help reclaim that femininity, because my age regression manifests more in the little girl fashion. High pitched squealing tails, like I doll up emotionally, and in the way that I express, the way that I speak, the way that I hold myself, and all that. So, yeah, I absolutely agree, especially with like the kinds of shows that I watch. I feel that like Peppa Pig, I know boys who watch Peppa Pig, like the girlier shows have really helped me accept that, going back to the connection, the association between like femininity and childishness. The Disney princess, the aloof Disney
Yeah.
princess. My partner, she compares me to Rapunzel a lot. That helps me recognize the place that I am at mentally when I am regressed, especially when I'm looking for other things to like invest in. It's always very deeply feminine activities. I mean, how like this, and he's not an octopus, not to get all correct on you, but my jellyfish here, even though he is a he, pink, white, and gray. So like color schemes are big. I'm an artist. Colors are a big thing for me. I have synesthesia. I feel color. I can smell color. I can give color a texture. I can almost give color a sort of. So colors are a big thing for me. So like bright, vibrant pastels, things like that have always been big, especially when, even though I was still male identifying, I wore a lot of black. And I wore black a lot because it was my replacement color for all the colors I wanted to wear, which were like lavender, where lavender rain comes from. It's my favorite color. Bright pinks, yellows. Yellow could be a gender neutral color. So even gender neutral stuff like yellow, gray, black, white. Colors are a very big thing for me. It's reclaiming my femininity, my gender in age play or regression holds a lot of significance for me because of the way my emotions manifest themselves
Yeah.
when I am in that mental space, that little space. It's always very feminine.
And I think sometimes it just makes you feel happier to have a splash colour around. I'd say it's a bit liberating and reclaiming that sense within yourself and just being a bit more, finding a joy in things, because I say that I can see how it does help you. And also, like one thing I have a things I want to ask you briefly, because I guess don't want to keep you too much longer. But as I said, like you type of dependent, and I know it's something that some people in the ABTL or age-regressor community might do as a choice because they find it's comforting that or it's like just something that they find pleasure in. But as you say that it's something that it started out as a medical reason. So how did you start using diapers, and was it something that you always felt comfortable in?
So the diaper thing specifically is where 99% of my trauma comes from. Before I get into that
Yeah.
really quickly, diapers for medical reasons in the ABDL community is actually a lot more common than you would think. Half of the people that I speak to have been in and out of diapers throughout their entire life. They've struggled with bedwetting, struggled with daytime incontinence, mostly specifically like wedding accidents. One of my close friends on my social media, they and I go into great detail about the stories that we've shared back and forth about instances of like having accidents and going back to diapers, I guess. So, but me specifically, I can't remember exactly when I was potty trained. I remember somewhere my mother told me she tried starting me at 2, which I was like, okay, that's really young in my opinion. I think 2 is a little young because I've noticed kids sometimes take a little bit longer than that.
Yeah.
But me, apparently, she says I potty trained easily. I can remember at about 3 years old, I immediately had this overwhelming feeling that I just wasn't ready. I remember my last diaper change. I remember being put into underwear for the first time. It was nerve wracking and I hated it. And the older I got, the more stressful it got because I still had younger siblings that were always in diapers. So I always had them near me. I always had pull ups near me. And I eventually just like, not even eventually, I think just throughout my entire life, I snagged one here and there once or twice a month. I always went back because there was that sense of like, I still needed these. And I did, because often during school, I would have accidents that I would never tell my family about because I was sucking up to them because they potty trained me, right? And so I think in my brain, they expected me to be potty trained. So I was like, okay, I have to. But I'm still having accidents. I'm still having issues holding it because a common thing with autism is problems with interoception. Interoception for the audience, we have more than just like our what's it, the four or five senses, touch, taste, smell, sight, those. We also have interoception, which is our internal or our sense of recognize our internal signals. Am I hot? Am I cold? Am I thirsty? Am I hungry? Is this itchy? Do I need to go to the bathroom? Those kinds of things. So autistic people struggle, especially younger autistic people, struggle a lot with incontinence problems all throughout their lives. So I am one of those cases where it was just on and off throughout my entire life. And then it was about when I was about 10 years old, my mother found diapers in my drawer. Not happy about it at all. She scolded me for it, scolded me. And then this progressed, like the scoldings and the intensity of the scoldings just increased over the years because they had this expectation that like at 10, 12, 13 years old, I should not be doing this. However, my sibling just below me was still a bedwetter at the time. So that was confusing to me. Like, okay, but why can he still have these? As an autistic kid, I couldn't explain that because I was too afraid of them not believing, because they wouldn't believe half the stuff that come out of my mouth because I was so imaginative. I would just go
Yeah.
off on these stories. And so they eventually were convinced that I was just a storyteller. So I came out to them one day about it. I came home. I was about 13 years old. This is sometime after my PGNOS diagnosis. I came home and they had my mattress flipped and they found my entire stash. And I looked at my father as he looked at me. He had a beer in his hand and he's like, "Do you really need these, kid?" And I just like, in as much shame as I possibly could, I just nodded my head. And he's like, "Okay, whatever." Didn't even further the conversation. And I've brought this up to him once and he doesn't believe it. I'm like, "Yeah, sure, dude." So that sucks. But then I think a second instance happened and he was very drunk, and from across, like on our little ottoman that we had that we used as a coffee table, he would start throwing stuff at me, trying to like figure out why I was so fixated on diapers, because he thought it was like a fetishist thing because I was a developing boy.
Yeah.
He thought it was because like I was getting off in these things, and like of course it was going to happen. I was a young developing boy. It's going to happen. I'm going to experiment with these things. But it was also like I still needed them. I just didn't know how to convey that to them
Yeah.
because like I didn't even know how to explain it myself. I still have accidents, question mark, right? I had to set little notes for myself here and there, just like I'd shove one in my pocket. And whenever I would just like have my hands in my pockets, I'd pull it out and I'd say, "Go to the bathroom," or something like that. I hid that from my parents to remind me to go to the bathrooms. And that's how I managed it for a really long time. High school came around. I had friends who were willing to do very fishy things for me. So I started ordering things off of Amazon gift cards. They would give to me to avoid my family members from knowing where all this money was coming from. And I would have them shipped to friends' houses. They would bring them to me. Their families were aware of this, and it was a huge thing. This weird like underground operation that I was running with one of my friends to get them, because they struggled with the same thing, ironically enough. So like we both understood their family and my
Right.
family. Then senior year came around and then I just started shipping them to the place that I was staying at. And then ever since then, it's just been on and off 24/7. Then I got into a serious relationship. I wasn't transitioned at the time. They were not open to the idea of me transitioning. And then I had a kid. That caused a couple of issues here and there. And I basically purged everything, which anybody in the ABDL community knows how purging is like. You just get rid of everything. There's so much shame built up. And then I would have accidents. So then I would stop sleeping. at about 19, 20 years old, I wasn't sleeping until about 4 in the morning, but I had to be to work at 6 in the morning. So that caused problems. And so then eventually that relationship deteriorated. And it wasn't until I started living on my own that I started going 24/7. It wasn't until then that I met that aforementioned partner who was open to the idea of me transitioning, that like she understood that I needed them. She just wasn't okay with the ABDL thing. And eventually the ABDL thing made her uncomfortable. So, that added to the stresses. And so it eventually progressed to a point where like I was fully dedicated to be 24/7, even though there was still shame attached to it. Like I knew it, I needed it because I was just,
Yeah,
I was
it's
destroying laundry. It got awkward being
yeah,
in public. I never left the house. I just,
yeah,
I got so depressed.
can tell at that point you started recognizing, like before when you were younger, you weren't aware that it could be a part of, even though you weren't exactly diagnosed when you like came out to your father about using diapers, but then then you started to open up about then when you were teenage years, then you didn't even know how it could affect your autism, and from trauma-based angle of come out with, because you couldn't sense when you need to go toilet, or like with anxiety, sometimes like you want to pee a bit more, and then it's just like, it's just that stress thing of it that can affect your bladder and messes your bladder up a bit. And so I guess that's where you didn't understand till this point where you describe it, where you starting to touch on that you can't go without them because it's actually something which is kind of disabling the incontinence, so you actually need some something to age you for, which is diapers.
Absolutely. And it took a lot of effort getting over the shame too. I think it was a sister of mine who explained it to me very well. She told me, I understand why you need these. And I hope you understand that this is considered a mobility aid. And I was like, yeah, no, that's a great way of putting it. In August before my 25th birthday, I video chatted my folks very first time. We've never video chatted. My mother downloaded Snapchat so that she can keep in tabs with me because from financial instability and everything like that, coming out of an already poor, not really poor, but
Yeah,
low income household. I didn't know how to work money very well, so didn't know how to pay my bills, and then I was just going through phone numbers. So they're like, "All right, let me get Snapchat. Let's video chat." And so we video chatted. And it was both of them, and I finally came out to them saying, "Hey, listen, this diaper problem that I had for years and years and years. I need you guys to know that like I wear them all the time, whether you guys like that or not. I don't care. I know that there's a lot of tensions involved. I don't care. I'm not going to allow that to control me, and I'm not going to allow those experiences to hold me back from being honest with you guys that like you guys did not understand that like I needed these. Like I wear these all the time." And they kind of just they thought about it and they're like, "Yeah, no, I we understand that like things happened and they could have been treated differently. They don't drink anymore, fortunately. So I think it's kind of like they're coming to, that now that their consciousnesses are clear from alcohol, they were able to approach that a little bit better. So
yeah,
now they are aware and things are going upwards, fortunately, now that I've come clean with that, because my brother that I've talked about a couple times, the bedwetter, he's below me.
yeah,
He asked me about that a couple of years ago when I was visiting, and I kind of had to tell him I'm not ready to talk about this. It took 2 years for me to process and then I came out to my folks about that, and they're aware of it, and my partner's been aware of it. Again, it's just one of those things. It's a part of who I am, just like my
yeah,
neurodivergency. It's a result of my neurodivergency,
yeah,
and
yeah. It's
they
part of you
understand that.
being disabled, and it shouldn't be something for whatever reasons people get judged on, because people are already aware that when you go into like a pharmacy or drugstore, that they are there for a reason, and you use it for a reason. It's like people just judge people wrongly for it, when why should it be different than using glasses or hearing aids.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, I'm glad that your relationship with your parents is getting better.
Yeah, no, it required a lot of confidence on my part to set myself free from those limitations that they placed on me, because there's a lot of, I'm going to use an analogy or metaphor here, but mental shackles that they placed me on that was just anxiety inducing. And so I had to be honest with myself and be truthful with myself that, like, I need these. This is a genuine disability. I can't treat it like it's what they thought it was, like some
Yeah.
weird, like, yes, of course it is a fetish, because it's ABDL in itself is a fetish, right?
Yeah.
So, but aside from just that, like, that's kind of a byproduct of it. It's very much like a disability. I need these.
Yeah.
These help me go about life without stressing out about it. And now that they recognize that with clear heads, we've all come to a place where, like, they understand that I have set these boundaries and I've been honest, and that they now know how it is now that the storm has settled and that time has gone on, and I've been able to articulate myself in a way that they can actually understand now. And that has helped quite
Yeah.
a bit. And our relationship has healed since then. So it's just taken a lot of honesty on my part and receptiveness on their part as well, which I'm blessed that they have actually taken the time to develop in themselves. So
Yeah. And as you like said earlier, with like the society between, like factions and, disagreements with different groups, it's like that's how eventually like things would have to improve. But when you were saying that, like you also like you label on your social media and identify it as ABTL, even though, like you said, using diapers reasons isn't fetishized. But how did you get to the point where where you're probably able to say that you are a diaper lover?
they don't know that for sure. But to say I'm a
Yeah,
diaper
yes,
lover, I'm only willing to tell them so much. I accepted the diaper lover ABTL identity when
and Santa, yeah,
I I came to accept that when my partner allowed me the ability to feel comfortable in myself too. Because all my previous relationships were just like, we understand the incontinence, we don't understand the ABDL, we're not going to deal with it. And if that's going to be you, that can be you. It's just I can't be with you if that's going to be a thing.
yeah,
So when my partner and I were just friends at the time and discussing everything like that, and I guess kind of breaking the ice, when she expressed that openness and that willingness to still pursue a potential relationship, even though I was incontinent and I had the attraction towards this lifestyle, did I actually start to accept myself in that?
yeah,
And that took a lot of time. But I think to say when I fully accepted it was, I think, when we got married. Like, it was just a milestone that I know that I was able to say for sure that, like, this person loves me for who I am. And there's a degree of external validation that I guess that I needed to further validate internally that I can accept this as a part of me, because I know I'm not crazy, because someone doesn't look at me like I'm crazy.
yeah,
So it took my partner telling me I'm not crazy for me to believe that I'm not crazy in this, and that is ultimately what led me to accepting this part of me that I am a very proud and not open, but open
yeah,
in certain spaces, ABDL.
yeah.
So, and that I would say about a year and a half
And
ago.
when you said that quite a majority of quite a high number of people who are APTL are incontinent, but then he said, in a way, when he said that, I thought it's kind of good in a sense, because if that's your, like your life of what you have to wear 24/7, like any type of clothing you wear, you should be able to love that and, like feel a sense of pleasure and joy in what you wear, and that should be the same for like the type.
Absolutely. In the field of psychology, there's this term called cognitive and I think being ABDL has helped me cognitively frame. In other words, it has helped me mentally perceive or see it differently. So when I say like cognitive reframing, like my fear of someone finding out about this was mostly off of the fact that like people don't see this as a positive thing. Like it's like, ew, you're an adult, you have to wear these. Adults don't wear these. And for me, it's so that's uncomfortable. However, I had to rethink it. I had to see it in a different light. And this community, the ABDL community, and the ability for me to express myself in a more immature way allows me to accept the fact that, like, yeah, I have to wear diapers. I'm an adult baby. What are you going to do about it? Like, come fight me. So it has fueled me a little bit to be more comfortable in myself and to accept the fact that, like, yes, this, I need these. And I'm an adult baby. Who else needs these babies? Of course, but I'm an adult too. So there's
Yeah.
that twofold thing.
I think sometimes you do need to do that cognitive framing when it comes to disability because, like like what is thought as disabling sometimes is like things negatively, like, when people are seen as like wheelchair bound or, like use that negative language, sometimes you need to look at things positively just to, be able to feel comfortable in your identity as that because, it's like the only identity that can really acquire or, be entirely born straight right at birth if I can actually like carve us like find a community and find a sense of pride in that kind of shapes personality. And it's something that not many other disabilities can have. Not many disabilities, but not many identities have that same thing.
Absolutely.
When do you start using adult pacifiers?
I think that was one of the first things I really dipped my toes into when it came to like the adult baby accessories. I think I bought my first what or my adult pacifier when I was in that aforementioned relationship. The first relationship that really accepted me for it because she enjoyed them. She had an oral fixation. I had to have been about 21 at the time. So about 2 years ago, I
Yeah.
started experimenting with pacifiers, and ever since then, oh, I've lost track of it. It's nearby, but I've spent a good amount of money on just accessories for pacifiers and stuff like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
about 2 years ago.
Do you find that? Is that like something that you want to explore and do you think exploring that has helped when we talk about like oral stimming and stimming for autistic people? Do you think it does help like a comfort thing?
Absolutely. It even helped me get off of vaping. I vaped for years. I've been vaping since I was 18. And I would suck on a pacifier during my time. And what I've noticed is like whenever I had a pacifier in my mouth, I didn't have the urge to vape because it was the hand to mouth thing, that oral fixation thing. And so the more I have allowed myself to nom and chew on or suck on a pacifier, I have found myself less and less likely to resort to being dependent off of a nicotine device. So
Yeah.
it's benefited my health quite a bit. I've been free of nicotine for almost 2 months now because of it. Because anytime I think of nicotine, I immediately reach for my pacifier. Back then, I didn't really do that. Like I would kind of have it as like a side item. But the more I paid attention to that, I was like, I don't need nicotine. I just want this.
Yeah.
So it has helped a lot, especially with the stimming too. I grind my teeth a lot. I clench my jaw in my
Oh
sleep.
yeah, I do grind my teeth a lot as well.
Yeah, it hurts.
Because it's something that with autistic people sometimes, like you choose something or as you grind teeth, and then for autistic ADHD adults or even some teens, you end up vaping or smoking. But like I find they can be quite like healthy alternative, and like as you can find adult size ones that quite a lot better for your teeth. And it's one of those things
Absolutely.
that I thought that would help me being autistic. I kind of like had the idea of trying, and so we got glad that you found it's one of those things that helped me find the community and helped by finding it helps me unmask and like giving me inspiration for this podcast. And as wrapping up now, I want to thank you for coming on. If there's anything else you want to say that you haven't got to say already, or if there's anything you want to promote where people can follow you, please feel free to say that.
My final remark is, if you feel alone, and I'm talking to everyone that's listening to this right now, I am literally talking to you. If you feel alone, you're not. You are not. There's a group near you. I guarantee it. Go find them. As for me, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and FetLife. Most of my handles, I think, are the same. On Instagram, it is at the RaIn, and best you navigate there because you can also find the rest of my links in the bio of my description. And again, I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and FetLife. I also do post adult content on JFF, so I do appreciate any of the support that goes towards that as